Hello everyone. So today we will start over chapter number 8. It's introduction to HTML. We're going to cover the basic or fundamentals of HTML, the web development, designing, scripting language, or you can call it a markup language. It's not a programming language, it's a markup language. We'll see the difference. So we have two agenda items that we're going to cover in today's video. Firstly, I will introduce you the basic terminologies of HTML or the web development, and you will see those terminologies over and over in part 2. And of course, if you guys, for example, pursue for software development or web development, you will see these terminologies over and over. So we have two agenda items, basic terminologies and a structure of a typical HTML code, or you can say a web page. First of all, before we start the basic terminologies, we need to know the difference between internet and web. That's very important. So please remember, internet is basically a physical network where we have servers, cables, optical fibers, everything, like anything which is in a tangible form. It is basically located over internet, or that is basically called internet. While web is basically the logical interface, a logical interface through which we access the resources located over internet. For example, let's say this is a web server. Let's say this web server name is ggc.edu. So this is basically called a website, a URL domain name. Typically we call it domain name. So basically the website content itself is stored over the server, and server is basically the part of internet. So website, there is nothing stored on the website itself stored on the server, and server is basically the part of internet. So for example, let's say just to give you a simple example, let's say you want to apply for admission. Let's say you want to access this particular PDF file. In order to access this PDF file, all you have to do is you just have to open your browser, type www.ggc.edu/ whatever the name of that PDF file is. So by using that, you can access that PDF file, the file which is located over server, over internet. So web basically provide a logical interface, just like, for example, computer is a hardware. Let's say this is your computer, that's the hardware. Can you, for example, access CPU, RAM, and all that stuff? Can you use them without having operating system? No. So operating system is the logical interface through which you can manage or access your CPU, RAM, hard drive, and all that stuff. Exactly the same way, web is basically kind of the operating system for internet. Okay. Now let's come to the basic terminologies, and if you will have any other confusions regarding web and internet, do let me know during the class time. So the first thing that the term that you will see over and over, it's called web pages. The web page, it's basically the document, or it's basically something when you access any website, the content or document that display on your browser is called a web page. So web page is basically a document. It's basically a document which is created in HTML language. In HTML. Well, what is HTML? HTML is Hypertext Markup language. Hypertext Markup language. So hypertext markup language. So any document which is created in HTML, it is called a web page. The most important thing of HTML code is basically called HTML markup tags. Please remember, HTML is nothing but just bunch of tags. In fact, what is a tag? Tags are basically special codes which basically tells the browser, or which tells browser the format of the text, and it is basically surrounded by these two brackets, these two arrows, surrounded by these two arrows. Just to give you a simple example, let's say what exactly it means and what kind of tags it is. So let's say, for example, if I want to put a paragraph, So for paragraph, you just have to put a tag like this particular tag, and you will type your paragraph here, whatever your paragraph is. Paragraph, let's say, hey, this is me, etc., etc. When you close the paragraph, you have to put a closing tag. So tags basically come in pair. This is called starting tag, start tag, and this is called closing tag. So start tag, and that is called closing tag. For example, if you want to add a heading, so the tag is going to be H1. This is heading 1, the large heading. Let's say heading 1. This is heading 1. Whatever you want in the heading 1, it will become between these two tags. Closing of heading tag, /H1. Let's say you want to bold the text. Let's say B. So for example, your name. If you type your name, and if it is between these two tags, like starting tag and closing tag, it will apply the bold effect. For example, italic effect, I. So italic effect, let's say if you type a text between these two tags, italic effect tag. So what's going to happen? It will apply italic effect. We will do that practically in the lab. Okay. So these are the tags. What are the tags? Tags are the special codes. Tell the browser what to do, how to display the text between the tags. Web browser is basically the application. It's the application. Web browser is just like your Chrome, Firefox and all. Application which converts HTML code into a format, understandable by a layman. So layman who doesn't understand the HTML coding and all that, let's say on the back end, there would be a HTML code. When the browser will get the HTML code, it will display a web page. We'll see that. This is basically what a browser is. The examples of browsers are, for example, Chrome. We have another example, Firefox, like Google Chrome, Firefox, Safari, etc., etc. There are many other browsers, Internet Explorer, etc., etc. Internet Edge currently. Next is HTML document. HTML document, and if you want to create a web page, you don't need a hi-fi software. Although there are some web page editors, which probably we can also use, but you can create a website HTML a document. HTML document is basically it's basically a text file. So we can create a website, a web page. We can create a web page. What is a web page? Web page is a document created in HTML. We can create a web page using any text editor. You don't need any kind of super duper tool. Of course, there are a lot of tools which professionals they typically use. For example, one of the tool is Adobe Dreamweaver. It resolves a lot of issues. You don't have to take care of tags and all that. So if everybody will have Adobe Dreamweaver, we're gonna use that. Otherwise, we can also use the regular text editor, Notepad, Notepad++, and all. Another term is URL. URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. Uniform Resource Locator, and this is the full URL. HTTP. For example, www.ggc.edu, for example, admissions. Something like that. Admission, for example, BS IT, something like that. Here, if you see, let me just highlight a few things right here. So this is basically HTTP. It stands for Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So Hypertext Transfer Protocol, what exactly it does? It basically controls the data. Controls data flow. Data flow, like the web page flow, between server and the client. Client is you, of course, the user. Server is basically, this is the client and that's the server. If you see, this is basically called, typically it's called domain name. Domain name, which defines mainly the organization name, GGC, and the nature of their business. .edu mean education, .gov, the government, organization, and of course this is called TLD, of course. This is domain name. So admissions and BSIT, this is basically the file location, like where exactly the file is. So basically, let me just make you understand. Let's say this is basically the client. This is the web server, GGC web server. So ggc.edu. This is, for example, the ggc.edu web server. If you access this particular file, admission BSIT, you know what, where you are. So ggc.edu, there will be a directory, a folder. There is a folder. On that particular folder, we have a file. It's called indexed.html. This is the file on which you see the web page. In this particular folder, there is another folder, like this is the folder. In that folder, there is another folder named admission. In that particular admission folder, we have this file BSIT. It basically tells you the address of exactly the file. So folder ggc.edu, this is the main folder. In this folder, we have another folder, admission, this folder. And in this folder, we have this file BSIT. And there could be many other folders and all that. Next is the XHTML. This is X. XHTML is basically extensible HTML, which mainly the idea was to fully replace HTML, but it's still not completed yet. So it's called extensible HTML, hypertext markup language. So main idea was to fully replace HTML, but still not, but it has some strict rules than HTML. HTML is very flexible. If you make any mistake, still they will execute the code, but XHTML, it does have some sort of strict rules. CSS stands for cascading style sheets. It's not basically something which you have to do separately. If you wrote your HTML code, within HTML code, you can put the CSS scripts as well. So CSS is typically used to add styling in the website, styles, colors, for example, graphics, or for example, sequences. So we typically use, or tables. We typically use CSS to add tables, etc., on the web page. We'll do that, of course. Next is the JavaScript. JavaScript is basically a scripting language. It's a scripting language for web pages. Scripting language for web pages, typically JavaScripts are something like that. In a HTML web page, you don't have to put that. In the HTML page, we actually put the scripts. And that particular script is basically the JavaScript. Typically, it is used to display some pop-up messages to make the website more interactive, and for other security things. So you can put some security configurations and all that using JavaScript. HTML5 is basically the latest standards of latest HTML standard. Still, it is something which is in progress. A lot of things are being added up. They have added new tags, like through which browser can identify the format of the text or the message. Like they have introduced the video and audio tags. Other than that, like for example, drawing features like Blackboard Collaborate, the BB Collaborate. That's one of the example of HTML5, which allows you to also interact on the whiteboard. So these are some of the terminologies that we talked about. If you will have any questions, anything to discuss, so of course we can always talk about it. Let's move on to the last agenda item, a structure of HTML code. This is a typical form of a web page. Let me just quickly explain you. Whenever you create a HTML or a web page, this is how the web page will look like. A web page has, let me identify you. So we will start with the HTML code. It will have a starting tag and a closing tag. You guys can see a pair, starting and the closing tag forward slash. Then a website will have two things, a head, starting of the head and the closing of the head. Then it will have a body, starting head and starting tag and closing tag. Everything will be in between HTML. So HTML tag would be starting and closing, like it will start and starting and ending of the website. A website will have a head. This is the head. And that's basically the body. Body is basically the one which will display on your web page. Head is basically, this will not display on the web page. On web page. Like for example, you want to give a title to your tab, the window, so you can actually put it in the head. If you want to add a JavaScript, like these JavaScripts, you will put the JavaScript in head. Body will have the content of the web page, whatever you want on your web page. Let's say, hello, this is me, click here for admissions and stuff like that. So that is basically, we will put it in the body. Whatever the buttons, anything, whatever you want on your web page, it would be added in the body. Okay. So this is just a typical structure of HTML code. We're going to practice that as well in the class. We'll create it, of course, simple web page. And last thing is we'll be working on the lab number 5, which is totally based on the HTML. So if you will have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the online class. Thank you.